Anime adaptations can be a real hit-or-miss venture. For some, the result is a dream come true, giving us a taste of what made the game so great just now in an animated form. In other cases, we get nothing more than a cheap effort at recreating the things fans enjoyed, just now produced for television. In the case of F-Zero, what we got was something nobody could have ever expected, an anime that may very well be among the greatest of its kind. F-Zero Falcon Densetsu is an anime based closely off of the F-Zero franchise. The show follows the adventures of a racer named Ryu Suzaku, known as Rick Wheeler in the localization, who was awakened in the year 2201 after a potentially fatal car accident put him into cryosleep, frozen until science had advanced far enough to save him. It seems Ryu was brought back for a specific reason. Before being injured, he was a world champion race car driver. And now, here in the future, the police need his help to stop an evil organization from winning the cultural phenomenon known as F-Zero, a racing tournament broadcast all across the galaxy with huge cash prizes. From this basic premise, the show follows Ryu and friends as they work together to stop the evil organization known as Dark Million from winning F-Zero races while also uncovering the truth behind their operations. This basic plot carries the show across its entire 51-episode duration, and as the series progresses, more and more of what makes it special steps out into the forefront. While characters such as Ryu Suzaku are original characters made for the anime, the majority of the cast is actually composed of the many F-Zero racers from the games. For example, Dr. Stewart is the one who brings Ryu Suzaku back from cryosleep, and Jody Summers the one commanding the mobile task force that Ryu becomes a part of. Likewise, Dark Million is headed up by Black Shadow, and his many lackeys consist of characters such as Zoda. Beneath Zoda are other familiar faces such as Octoman and Biorex. The list goes on. The constant presence of familiar faces is one of the show's greatest strengths. As the series goes on, almost every single F-Zero racer is given an episode specifically focused on them, which helps establish their role in the show's continuity, while also offering up some wonderful fan service in between. While the plot and characters are more or less rebooted for the sake of this new universe, the resulting experience is nothing short of a great ride. And that is something to keep in mind. This entire anime takes place in its own original anime universe, not the same one from the original F-Zero games. The basic formula of the team working together to overcome Dark Million shenanigans through the means of F-Zero races is pretty much the plot and basic formula for the first 30 episodes or so. When an episode isn't focused on the mobile task force fighting Dark Million, it's usually some sort of rivalry between two racers. It's clear that the writers had a lot of fun playing around with all of these different characters. There's no shortage of creativity to go along with Falcon Densetsu. The show manages to excel specifically at being a fun anime while also honoring the legacy of the games themselves. The latter half of the show becomes a bit more plot-focused, with each episode becoming somewhat relevant to what happens in the next. While the plot isn't exactly high art, the entire show is fun from start to finish. It's clear that the writers were having a great time with the F-Zero IP, and their love for other IPs like Terminator completely bleeds through the project. It's a lot of fun to see the references. The easiest way to describe Falcon Densetsu in purely anime terms would be a cross between Tatsunoko Speed Racer and Yatterman, peppered top to bottom with comedy and action that keeps the viewer engaged. This is a show that I found myself watching in 3 or 4 episode bursts at a time, and each time something absolutely unbelievable would happen on screen, I'd start busting out laughing or crying in response. And I do mean that sincerely. This show has no shortage of emotional content. It visits many of the classic narrative tropes, being an unbreakable bond between friends, personal duty, father and son, master and student, and so much more. And just when you let your guard down, something brilliant happens. The hype builds up around the actions on the screen, and then suddenly, just as things are reaching their climax, you hear it. Usually, an anime will reserve its use of the theme song for that singular hype moment during the finale, but Falcon Densetsu does not obey that limitation. The opening theme, The Meaning of Truth, is an absolute banger that the showrunners did not hesitate to bring out whenever it was necessary. And every single time it happens, it feels incredible. Absolutely incredible. This is a song that does not fall short of delivering on its promises each and every time you hear it. You just know something awesome is about to happen on screen, and sure enough, it always does. This is the kind of theme song you don't skip, and I can say that having watched the entirety of the 51 episodes without skipping the opening once. Even after 50 episodes of sitting through the same opening theme, I was genuinely disappointed that we wouldn't get to sit through it a 51st time in the show's final episode, which forgoes the opening and ending themes. Something we also haven't talked a whole lot about yet is probably the one thing you'd expect to see more of in the show, and that's Captain Falcon himself. While the show is titled F-Zero Legend of Falcon, Captain Falcon has a surprisingly hands-off role for most of the show's plot. His actions are deeply important to the overall story, but we don't see him very often on screen outside of a handful of memorable episodes. Indeed, Captain Falcon sits at the very center of the going-ons in the story, but he operates more like Batman in the eyes of the Mobile Task Force. He's an active third party in many of the events that take place, but despite this, his appearances are reserved for when they matter most. Fortunately for us, in lieu of Captain Falcon, we have the incredible Bart Lemming, owner of the Falcon House Cafe and Captain Falcon's #1 fan. Aside from offering a delicious cup of coffee to his customers for just 280 credits, Bart also fills in as the post-credits Bart Sensei, offering the viewer additional lore and content related to the show. Bart fills in the gaps with his direct commentary for the viewer, and just as each installment of the opening deserves to be watched, the same can be said of Barts Lessons. No viewing of Falcon Densetsu is complete without starting with Captain Falcon telling us to watch the show in a well-lit room far away from the television, and ending with a lesson from Bart. And while I actively did my best to avoid the next episode previews for the sake of spoilers, the few that I did watch surprised me. They typically had hilarious banter between the characters, most notably Ryu and Jack Levin. Now, despite all these incredible things I do have to say about Falcon Densetsu, the show isn't without its flaws. There's no shortage of the occasional derpy-looking anime face, and sometimes the CGI is very unfavorable to some viewers. I personally never took issue with these things, and whenever I saw something silly on screen, I laughed about it rather than complained. I've also heard quite a number of hardcore F-Zero fans complain about the overall presentation of some of the characters being too far of a deviation from the source material, and I can respect that. The show initially aired in 2003 and finished its run in the following year. While the show did finish airing, its overall success is a different story. Firstly, in the US market, the rights for the show were picked up by 4Kids, most well known for their work on series like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! The show would only receive 15 episodes in the US before being cancelled. Likewise, the show aired alongside the launch of 2 F-Zero video games based on the show, the first being F-Zero GP Legend and the second, F-Zero Climax. Consequently, with the primary marketing for these games being the anime itself, the games were a total failure on release, with GP Legend severely underperforming in the US and Climax never reaching the West at all. A number of factors can be attributed to these failures, but the real takeaway is the end result. F-Zero was officially retired as a franchise after the anime's run was finished. Despite this tragic tale, one thing remains certain for me. Over a decade and a half after its release, I finally got the chance to watch the show for myself. Despite my own hesitations about watching a 51-episode show about F-Zero and expectations that it would be a total piece of garbage, I was overjoyed to discover that I would not only be proven wrong, but singing its praises now that it's over. I'm finding myself wishing there was more to it after all is said and done. This show shattered my expectations in ways I never could have expected, and the end result is a modern-day F-Zero fan who's eager to see this IP rise from the ashes again. If you enjoy the tropes of old-school anime, futuristic racing, soulful adaptations, and most of all, F-Zero, you owe it to yourself to watch F-Zero Falcon Densetsu. This has been Stanpai. Thanks for watching. Kokoro ni boost fire! 強く儚きものよどの手を引き導いて真実と呼べる場所であるなら戸惑い傷ついてもこの人生